So today, I'll show you how to change a few simple settings on your iPhone, cut down data usage, and maybe save you some money off your next bill. You might even save enough data each month to drop onto a lower plan. Okay, let's dive right in. So the first thing you want to do is open your iPhone settings. Then select the mobile data option. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see all your iPhone apps and how much data they've been using. If you've never been here before or reset the statistics, you may see some pretty large numbers here. So what we're going to do is get this under control by changing a few settings. If we scroll right down to the bottom, we're going to see a few extra settings for iCloud Drive and iCloud Backup. And when these are turned on, they allow your phone to sync to iCloud using your mobile data. This could mean using a lot of data if you have a lot of photos or your iCloud backup is quite big. While we're here, we might as well switch these off right now. So now we've done this, what this means that your iCloud Drive, sync and backup will only work when you're on a Wi-Fi network. However, a quick word of caution, if you don't regularly connect to a Wi-Fi network, you may not want to change this setting, because if you do lose your phone, you may have some data on it that's not been synced to iCloud yet. Maybe some photos you've just taken. If you have a big data allowance or an unlimited plan, you may think, why should I worry? However, when you're abroad, your mobile provider might give you what's called a fair use limit. So mine, for instance, when I'm in an EU country, I'm allowed to use my data as normal. However, I get a 12 gig data cap. But if I'm outside an allowed country, I get no data allowance at all, and that's when it gets really expensive. Anyway, back to the settings. The one I haven't mentioned yet is Wi-Fi Assist. Basically, if your iPhone thinks the Wi-Fi network you're connected to is a bit dodgy, then it will try and switch over to the data network to see if it's got a better connection. Obviously, this is going to use data, push you up towards that limit, and maybe cost you more than you need to pay. And the crazy thing is, you wouldn't know it's even happened. So you'll be wondering why you're using all this data. Watch that Wi-Fi Assist. I actually keep it off all the time on my phone. Earlier, when we were scrolling through the apps, we saw that some of them had amounts of data next to them that they'd used. Well, this reset statistics button will actually clear those back to zero. And this is really useful if you want to know if the changes we've been making have been successful. As when you reset it to zero, obviously you can see which apps are using which data. I tend to reset this setting when I'm going on holiday, so I can keep an eye on my data usage, either if I'm in an allowed country, an EU country where I get 12 gig limit, or if I'm in a really expensive country and I want to keep an eye on how much data I'm using. Next, we'll stop all apps from using any mobile data. This means they'll only be able to make a connection out when they're on Wi-Fi, and they won't be using any of your mobile data. So let's scroll up and start toggling off the switch for every single app to stop it using data. Of course, if you've got lots of apps like I have here, it might take a few minutes. Once you've switched off all the apps and reset those statistics, you may see some data, some mobile data still being used and wondering what that is. Well, the answer is the iPhone system services. If we click in and take a quick look, we can see a whole host of things that iPhone needs to use data for. The list is quite long, but there's not a lot you can do about it. Okay, so far we've switched off all of the apps we can that can use mobile data. And now we're going to switch a few of them back on again. These are the apps that we want to use for mobile data. So when you're out and about, there'll be things that you want to use. You don't want everything switched off. I mean, let's face it, you are paying for some data, you might as well use it. So as an example, recently I went on holiday. The data rates there were astronomical. They weren't included in my plan. However, when I was out and about, I still wanted to be able to use WhatsApp. So I did what we've already done and switched everything off. And then basically I just switched WhatsApp back on. In addition, because I was away, I had to turn on mobile roaming. I also turned off the mobile data. So what that means is that no mobile data could pass through my phone at all, not even for those Apple system services. And when I wanted to use my phone, use my WhatsApp, I switched on the mobile data, everything else was set to go. I used it, sent, received messages, turned that data back off again. So I was using the minimum data absolutely necessary. Just one other note, if you do use a VPN and you've got it switched on, then you will actually need to enable that as well for data, because your WhatsApp will try and go over the VPN if the VPN is trying to connect. If you don't have a VPN, don't worry about it. Okay, there you have it. We've changed our settings to reduce the iPhone's data usage. As I mentioned earlier, this could help you reduce the tariff you're on, or if you're going abroad to a really expensive country, keep that mobile bill a lot smaller and stop you getting ripped off by your mobile provider. In a future video, we'll be looking inside the apps themselves. So we'll be looking at the settings for WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to see how we can tweak their settings to use even less data. Because let's face it, we like to keep connected when we're on the move. So if we turn off data for those services, we might have a pretty boring time. But we want to try and minimize the data usage when it's all possible. Please subscribe and click the bell to get notified when I upload a new video. I'm Darren. Thank you for watching.